Professor Jiang. Right now, he's everywhere on YouTube. So I'm not going to introduce who he is. Instead, as a Chinese person, I want to tell you something else. 3 things actually. First, his early life from childhood to Yale. Second, and more importantly, since 2008, Professor Jiang has mainly been working on education reform in China, and it's been quite controversial. Yes, this video will focus mainly on education rather than his views on geopolitics. Third, how Chinese people actually see him today. The first 2 things are mostly from his book, Innovation in China's Education. Alright, let's start. Professor Jiang Xueqin, was born in 1976 in Guangdong, China. His surname Jiang, the same as Jiang Zemin, the former leader of China, while Xue means learn and Qin means diligently. Xueqin literally means to study earnestly and pursue knowledge with diligence. At the age of 6, he moved to Canada, Toronto, with his parents. His father used to be a middle school teacher in China, but in Canada, he washed dishes. His mother did sewing jobs to support the family. So his childhood wasn't really happy. He was insecure, sensitive, not confident. Until one day, in 9th grade, a substitute teacher told him something simple. You are actually very smart. You have talent. You should aim higher. That sentence changed everything. It became his turning point. From that moment on, he went all in. He studied like crazy. 4 hours of sleep a day, no entertainment, just books. In 1995, he got a full scholarship to Yale University, majoring in English literature. He later wrote, "Getting into Yale was probably the proudest moment of my father's life." But here's the twist. Yale didn't make him feel successful. It made him feel lost. He wrote, "I knew I didn't belong here, and I never would." He couldn't find people like him, couldn't find meaningful conversations. He felt completely alone. And then, almost by accident, he started getting interested in Chinese history and learning Chinese. Yeah, believe it or not, Professor Jiang could barely speak Chinese back then. He might have spoken Cantonese, but Mandarin and Chinese characters total struggle for him. Even this book was translated into Chinese by someone else. But somehow, this curiosity gave him something he had never had before, a sense of identity. So in 1998, he came to China, to Beijing, just to see the country for himself. And there, he met someone who would change his life, Wang Zheng. Wang Zheng, 12 years older than Jiang, was already vice principal at one of Beijing's top high schools, and a rising figure in China's education reform. And this is important. China was developing fast, right? But for education, especially the Gaokao, China's college entrance examination, which helped millions of people succeed, was also a total nightmare for Chinese students. Endless exams, endless pressure. So Jiang joined a short teaching experiment in Wang Zheng's school. He loved chatting with students, students loved him too. But reality hit hard. Everyone had to focus on only one thing: exams. No time for curiosity, no room for personality. That's when he realized this system might be crushing creativity. So in 1999, he and Wang Zheng had a serious conversation. They shared the same dream: build a school that helps students discover themselves, not just pass exams. After graduating from Yale, he tried to be a writer and a journalist. He also worked on a UN project in Afghanistan, but that was boring and felt totally meaningless. Fast forward to 2008, Wang Zheng became principal of a top high school in Shenzhen. He invited Jiang back to China, this time with a mission: build an international program inside a traditional Chinese public high school. Professor Jiang knew this was the chance he'd been waiting for. This was the career he was willing to put his whole life into. Let me explain something quickly. In China, most high schools follow a traditional path. Students take the Gaokao and go to a Chinese college. We call it within the system. But this is another way. International programs, mostly in big cities, designed for students who want to study abroad, which is outside the system. At the time, more and more top students were going to that route, but there wasn't much support for them yet. So what Wang Zheng and young Professor Jiang wanted to do was simple: bring that international track into a traditional school and try something new. However, this was also his most controversial time. Let's check out what the Chinese media reported back then. Some reports have been quite positive. The students in this program started and ran China's first commercially operated daily newspaper in high school, the first campus cafe, and an English magazine, all by themselves. They gradually learned self-discipline, teamwork, critical thinking, and innovation. Some students adapted super quickly when they got to American colleges. Over the years, they have written to Jiang recalling that time together. They realized the most valuable thing they learned in the international program was confidence, daring to chase their dreams, embracing and adapting to new environments. But there is another side to the story. A failed elite education experiment by a Yale grade. At one point, Jiang announced with any democratic process, the student union was dissolved. That triggered huge backlash. He was heavily criticized by students and their parents. Authoritarian, unfair, abusing public resources. Some people said this is using public school resources for a small elite group. After he left, many of his reforms were rolled back. And even worse, some early students' outcomes weren't that impressive. Later, he followed Wang Zheng to another school in Beijing, tried to continue the reform. But this time, the pushback was even stronger. From schools, from parents, from tradition. By 2012, Professor Jiang left. Everything he built was gone. In his book, he was brutally honest. 90% was my fault. He said he was too impatient, too arrogant, saw himself as a savior, underestimating the inertia of Chinese culture and the system. After that, he lived in Toronto, Shenzhen, Beijing, and Chengdu for a while. He also worked as a researcher at the Global Education Project at Harvard. Then, he wrote this book in 2014. In the end of the book, he said, "Innovation will define China's future, but sooner or later, China will realize it can't rely on American universities to teach its students how to be creative. That has to come from within." In 2022, he joined a new international school in Beijing, Moonshot Academy, as a Western philosophy teacher. That's exactly the classroom you see in his videos. Now, let's talk about something you probably won't see on YouTube, how Chinese people actually view him. First off, Professor Jiang is nowhere near as popular on the Chinese internet as he is on YouTube. For example, if I search his name on Bilibili, basically the Chinese version of YouTube, or on Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok, or RedNote, 小红书, the views are not very high. Of course, Professor Jiang has made it clear that he doesn't share opinions on Chinese internet or do interviews with Chinese media. Then, someone discussed his stance. Some Western media suspect he's got ties to Chinese government, but almost no Chinese viewers think that. Interestingly, he rarely openly supports or criticizes the Chinese government. For example, in the recent interview with Tucker Carlson, he spoke positively about Japan, but avoided talking too much about China. Some people also see his views as conspiracy theories. Over a decade ago, ideas about secret societies, global control, and groups like the Freemasons were everywhere on the Chinese internet, which kind of gave Chinese netizens a bit of PTSD towards that kind of thinking. However, many people just don't care. To them, he's just another overseas internet personality, not relevant to their daily life. So, that's the full picture. Putting all these controversies aside, his grind as a kid from a poor family and the effort he put into education reform deserve to be remembered. And whether he's technically a professor or not, his deep knowledge of history, of philosophy and literature, and especially his honesty in his book, is totally worth my admiring. Alright, that's what I wanted to share with you. If you like this, if you want more about China, let me know in the comments. Besides, if you want not just watch it, I also teach Chinese and cultural context. Link in the description. See you next time.